Welcome back to Vietnamese Case Files. Have you ever wondered what dark secrets might lie behind doctoral degrees, wealthy titles, or the polished image of success? In today's compilation video, we will uncover 6 shocking criminal cases in which individuals of Vietnamese origin used exceptional intelligence and sophisticated technology to manipulate international systems. From a 3 billion USD Bitcoin money laundering hub run by a PhD holder, to a multi-state casino fraud empire, to ruthless Ponzi schemes and pandemic relief scams that preyed on the trust of their own community, we will even confront transcontinental wildlife trafficking operations and deeply disturbing threats to national security. Let's delve into the descent of these misguided geniuses and see that no matter how well they hide, justice will always uncover the truth. And if you enjoy investigative true crime content and want to follow along with Vietnamese Case Files and upcoming cases, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you won't miss a single episode. Now, let's begin. One evening in 2002, at the Tycoon casino on the outskirts of San Diego, California, a casino manager noticed a young female card dealer performing an unusual shuffling motion. During a crowded mini baccarat game, the dealer appeared to merely pretend to shuffle before quickly proceeding to deal the cards. As a result, the group of players at her table won continuously in an abnormal manner, and they all placed very large bets. Professional instinct prompted the security staff to raise the alarm. Slow-motion security footage confirmed that the dealer had performed a false shuffle, a term referring to a fake shuffling technique in which the person appears to mix the deck but actually keeps a portion of the cards in their original order. Tycoon's management immediately terminated the employee on the spot and reported the incident to local authorities. The information was also promptly forwarded to the Federal Bureau of Investigation. At this point, you may wonder why such a seemingly minor incident had to be reported to the FBI. In fact, in the United States, casino operations fall under federal oversight and are subject to federal law, as this is a highly profitable industry that is also vulnerable to money laundering schemes and organized crime. Therefore, when any unusual activity occurs in casinos, local authorities can report it to the Federal Bureau of Investigation for thorough handling and support. However, since this incident initially appeared to be nothing too complicated, Special Agent Pete Casey, the federal investigator in charge of the case, believed he was just handling something minor. He and his colleagues thought it was an isolated incident, assuming the female dealer needed money and had colluded with friends to profit from a few scattered hands. Nevertheless, following procedure, the investigative team still needed to personally inspect the Tycoon casino. There, they found that the deck of cards used in the game still contained a slug, meaning a portion of the deck had not been shuffled. These cards were positioned next to each other in the exact order they had previously been dealt, proving there had been manipulation. On the floor, a few cigarette butts were scattered. At first, this detail drew little attention, as smoking while gambling is nothing unusual. A quick review of the surveillance footage of the fraudulent hand showed Casey a middle-aged Asian woman standing near the table, calmly observing. She did not place any bets herself, only holding a cigarette in her hand and occasionally raising one finger toward it before lowering it again. However, at that time, investigators had not yet deciphered these subtle signals. Overall, everything seemed minor and trivial, leading Agent Casey to believe this was merely a small time scheme unrelated to any large organization. During questioning, the female dealer claimed she had just tried it for fun and did not implicate anyone else. The case was documented and processed according to procedure, but a few hundred USD was not enough for the FBI to open a major investigation. The federal investigative team in San Diego temporarily shelved the file. However, they soon had to reopen the case file when, in late 2002 to early 2003, leads connected to that seemingly isolated incident kept surfacing. Several casinos in California began reporting unusual winning streaks by patrons. Notably, Cache Creek Casino near Sacramento reported that in March 2003 alone, they had lost $158,000 within just a few weeks due to a group of players participating in baccarat and blackjack. Cache Creek's surveillance cameras also vaguely captured what appeared to be a similar false shuffle technique as the one used at Tycoon Casino. At this point, the FBI truly believed that an interstate fraud ring was operating. However, identifying the suspects was far from easy. They moved constantly, operating across a wide range from Southern California to Northern California, then spreading to other states. According to an overall report, as many as 29 casinos had been targeted, including several Native American casinos with relatively lax security, such as Saigon Casino, Barona Valley Ranch, Pechanga Resort, Cache Creek, and Nooksack River Casino. In addition, several commercial casinos were also in the criminals' sights, including Palace Station, Monte Carlo, Caesars Indiana, Mohegan Sun, Foxwoods, Horseshoe, and Trump 29. Each casino was hit only once, yet suffered significant losses not only financially but also in reputation. The group operated with extreme caution. They usually appeared in small numbers at each location, posing as ordinary patrons. No one used their real name, and any identification presented during checks was fake. The FBI's greatest obstacle was their inability to identify faces or obtain any specific names to pursue. By 2004, the FBI compiled scattered reports from multiple locations and decided to open a full-scale investigation, internally codenamed Operation Smoking Dragon, a reference to the cigarette signals that had appeared in several surveillance videos. Investigators speculated that this was a profit-driven criminal group that collaborated out of mutual interest with the involvement of outsiders. A single, loyal inner circle could not possibly have insiders at so many different casinos. And where there are profits, there are conflicts. Therefore, if they could persuade dealers who had previously cooperated with the group to turn informant, a breakthrough might follow. In late 2005 and early 2006, the FBI secretly approached several dealers who had previously worked with the group. These individuals voluntarily became informants after the ringleaders skimmed money from their agreed shares. They realized that the effort they put in was substantial while their portion was unfairly small. Gradually growing resentful, they were now willing to cooperate with the FBI to expose the entire network. The informant dealers provided crucial information that behind the major operations was a Vietnamese couple based in San Diego. They referred to the husband as Pai Gao John, whose surname was Trung, and the wife as Van Trun. This was the first time investigators had heard the nickname Pai Gao John, suggesting he had once played or dealt Pai Gao, a popular card game. Based on the informant's statements, the FBI began covert surveillance of Trung and Trun families in San Diego, who displayed suspicious behavior. At the same time, they coordinated with the Mississippi Gaming Commission, which had reported a similar fraud case, to carry out a bold sting operation. In June 2006, an undercover agent from the Mississippi Gaming Commission posed as a casino dealer seeking to split profits with the fraud group known as the Tran organization. He managed to connect directly with the ringleader Pai Gao John and arranged a secret meeting at a cafe near a casino in Biloxi, Mississippi. Every development at the meeting was secretly recorded. In the captured footage, the man identifying himself as John boasted enthusiastically about his achievements. He openly claimed that he and his accomplices had raked in nearly $1 million USD in a single night at one casino and declared that his plan was one of a kind, impossible to catch. The golden evidence was now in the FBI's hands, the mastermind's arrogant confessions clearly documented on video. That meeting marked the turning point. For the first time, investigators had a clear identity behind the phantom they had been pursuing for so long. The first suspect was Quoc Trung, also known as Pai Gao John, around 40 years old, born in Vietnam, and immigrated to the United States with his family at a young age. He had previously worked as a technician at casinos in California and was deeply passionate about gambling. Within the community, Quoc Trung was remembered as a drifter, constantly moving around without stable employment. Thanks to his time working in casinos, Trung understood security loopholes and casino employee psychology. He nurtured elaborate schemes in hopes of changing his life. The leader of this fraud ring also had a capable partner, his wife, Van Thu Trun, also around 40 years old, described as an intelligent and discreet woman from a Vietnamese immigrant family. She had previously worked as a dealer at a tribal casino in San Diego in 2002. From that point on, the investigation accelerated rapidly. The FBI in San Diego coordinated with the Internal Revenue Service, IRS, the San Diego County Sheriff's Department, and the California Department of Justice to form a task force targeting the Tran organization, gathering evidence. They tracked down bank accounts, phone records, and passports belonging to the suspects. It turned out that as early as 2002, Van Thu Trun and her husband had already acquired assets far exceeding their legitimate income, including 2 houses in San Diego, real estate in Vietnam, a new model Porsche, Rolex watches, and diamond jewelry. All of these were purchased in cash with no clear source of funds. Piece by piece, the puzzle came together, revealing a federally operated, family-run organized crime ring. With solid grounds for suspicion, the FBI intensified evidence collection in preparation for arrests. They applied for wiretap authorization on suspected phone numbers and obtained numerous coded conversations among members of the Tran organization discussing plans for operations in various locations. The Federal Bureau of Investigation decided to cast a wide net, coordinating with Canadian authorities in multiple states to ambush the suspects immediately after they carried out their schemes. In the summer of 2007, the coordinated crackdown took place. On May 21, 2007, a federal grand jury in San Diego secretly approved a 3-count indictment against the Tran couple and their accomplices. The indictment charged them with participating in a criminal organization, conspiracy to steal casino property, including property belonging to federally protected Native American tribes, and conspiracy to commit money laundering. On May 24, 2007, arrest warrants were executed simultaneously in San Diego, Los Angeles, Las Vegas, and several other cities. 14 key suspects were taken into custody, including Quoc Trung, Van Thu Tran, and Tai Kiem Tran. During the search of the Trung residence, agents seized a large amount of cash, savings accounts worth millions of USD, and luxury goods used to conceal illicit assets. Electronic devices were also confiscated, including computers installed with card-predicting software, walkie-talkies, and ultra-small earpieces used to exchange signals during fraudulent plays. After the initial wave of arrests, the investigation continued to expand. By 2008, another indictment charged an additional 11 individuals connected to the operation, primarily colluding dealers and lower-level participants who had taken part in individual schemes. In September 2009, 8 more individuals were indicted, including Mike Wasilewski, a former dealer at Mohegan Sun, and several recruited players who acted as decoys. In total, 47 individuals were indicted in this operation. During this period, investigators also worked to determine each person's role, identifying who the masterminds were, who carried out the schemes, and who had only participated a few times. Many defendants chose to cooperate with prosecutors in exchange for reduced sentences. As a result, prosecutors were able to reconstruct each scheme in detail, from how the group recruited dealers and bribed pit bosses to how they prepared computers and equipment at hotels near the casinos before each operation. At the center of every tactic was the false shuffle. According to experts, this is a classic technique familiar even to amateur magicians. What made it truly formidable was that the group standardized the technique and practiced it to perfection, making it extremely difficult for surveillance cameras to detect. The Tran organization even opened training classes for dealers in San Diego. They taught their students hand positioning, card shielding angles, and how to exploit camera blind spots, all to a masterful level. Once fully trained, these corrupt dealers would return to their casinos, waiting for the right moment to assist when their accomplices arrived, forming a vast network that spanned across the United States. To achieve this, the Tran organization was tightly managed and operated almost like a corporation. Members were assigned to different shifts at the same casino to avoid drawing attention. In each operation, roles were clearly assigned. The group typically included a spotter, responsible for tracking and memorizing cards, a computer operator stationed at a nearby hotel to analyze data, a signal relay inside the casino, and several individuals posing as high-rolling gamblers who would place large bets simultaneously upon receiving the signal. Among them, the signal relay was just as crucial as the dealer. This person had to remain alert, assess the situation, and issue coded commands through subtle gestures, with a cigarette raising one finger meant place the bet, while 2 fingers meant stop. This signaling system closely resembled how baseball players receive signs from their coach. Furthermore, the Tran organization had a logistics team responsible for arranging hotels, transportation, and converting chips into cash. Some members later recounted that the ringleaders had designed a detailed year-long schedule, moving from the West Coast to the East Coast of the United States, sometimes even to Canada, never staying in one place for too long. This explains why it took casinos so long to realize they were being targeted by the same group. The criminals would strike fast and leave, never immediately returning to a previous location. However, relying solely on false shuffles and manual memorization would not have been enough to guarantee major wins. The group quickly upgraded their methods with technology. From 2004 to 2005, the Tran organization began equipping themselves with concealed transmitters and specially designed software to accelerate card recognition. Specifically, a spotter would stand near the table and use a hidden camera installed in a phone or shirt button to record the order of cards during the initial deal. The footage was transmitted to a hotel room where an accomplice ran predictive software. Within minutes, the computer would calculate the repeating card pattern resulting from the dealer's false shuffle. The results were then relayed via an ultra-small earpiece to the signal relay inside the casino, who would in turn cue the bettors. As a result, the group almost never lost on rounds where the card sequence had been identified in advance. In one blackjack session, they reportedly won $900,000 in just 90 minutes, such a staggering victory that even casino staff were alarmed. Despite their ability to win large sums, the group exercised calculated restraint. They never pushed their luck to the point of immediate suspicion. Instead, after a significant win, they would withdraw right away. By spreading their operations across numerous locations, taking a moderate amount from each, the group managed to operate undetected for 5 years. Nevertheless, the truth eventually surfaced. Information from informants and investigative data revealed that around 2005 to 2006, internal fractures began to appear within the Tran organization. Quoc Trung, growing overly confident, skimmed money from several associates and abandoned them when danger arose. That very betrayal prompted many of them to cooperate with the FBI, providing evidence that led to the Sting meeting in 2006. Quoc Trung's ego and greed inadvertently became an inside ally for justice. The Tran organization, once the largest gambling fraud ring in United States history, ultimately collapsed. From the evidence collected and testimonies provided by informants, the FBI successfully reconstructed the entire criminal operation of the Tran organization. In 2002, in San Diego, the Vietnamese-born dealer couple Quoc Trung and Thu Tran grew frustrated with their modest salaries and noticed loopholes during card shuffling. During quiet night shifts, they secretly practiced a sleight of hand trick that allowed them to shuffle while preserving a portion of the deck's order. They conducted their first test at a Pai Gow table in the very casino where they worked. The result was a modest win of a few hundred USD, but it was enough to excite them. They began recruiting relatives and friends to join. Thu Tran persuaded family members, while Quoc Trung sought out trusted gambling associates. A relative named Tycoon Tran joined the group, bringing with him the idea of using computer software to make their operation more sophisticated. They decided to attempt a major score to prove their plan was viable. In early 2003, a group of about 15 members left San Diego and headed to Cache Creek Casino in Northern California. There, they had already planted an insider dealer, a relative of Thu Tran. This time, they switched to mini baccarat to make card tracking easier. Throughout March 2003, Cache Creek observed Asian patrons who appeared unlucky during the day but staged remarkable comebacks at night, winning big before leaving. Quoc Trung's group organized clear shifts. The daytime shift incurred small losses to build trust, while the night shift executed the false shuffle and secured major wins before disappearing. In just 1 month, they pocketed $158,000. The success at Cache Creek convinced the group they were untouchable. After this model operation, the Tran organization was officially formed. They built what could truly be described as a criminal enterprise, with Quoc Trung appointing himself as president, Thu Tran managing finances, and Tycoon Tran overseeing technical operations. They compiled a list of target casinos nationwide, prioritizing those with weak security or existing insiders. The group even sent scouts to major casinos in Mississippi and Indiana to study camera placements and identify rule vulnerabilities. From 2003 to 2005 marked the gang's most profitable period. They moved continuously from California to Nevada, down to Louisiana, across to Mississippi, up to Connecticut, and even into Canada. At each location, the same script was repeated. The Tran organization had bribed dealers in place. Members entered as ordinary players, waited for the right moment to signal the false shuffle, and then placed large bets on favorable hands. On average, each operation brought in tens of thousands to several hundred thousand USD. At the peak of their activities, at Resorts East Chicago in Indiana, they coordinated 2 dealers and multiple players to dominate nearly an entire mini baccarat table. By repeatedly executing false shuffles, they won $868,000 in just 90 minutes of play. This staggering figure was later documented in a report by the United States Department of Justice. As their operations expanded, the group became increasingly sophisticated. At first, they relied on manual card memorization, but later Tran persuaded the others to invest in technological equipment. They purchased miniature cameras hidden in clothing or mobile phones to secretly record the gaming tables, acquired walkie-talkies and earpieces to transmit signals, and most notably, hired someone to develop specialized software capable of predicting card sequences once the initial order was entered. This technological upgrade was costly, but it allowed them to execute operations swiftly and win with near certainty. Quoc and Van Thu Tran grew wealthy at a rapid pace. They purchased 2 houses in San Diego, secretly transferred money to buy land in Vietnam, and acquired Porsche and Mercedes vehicles for what they described as secure travel. Millions of USD in cash were entrusted to relatives for safekeeping or divided into smaller deposits under other names in various bank accounts as part of their money laundering efforts. Their increasingly luxurious lifestyle only drove the couple deeper into criminal activity. However, their illicit glory was short-lived. Around late 2005, several members grew resentful at having to surrender most of their winnings to the Tran couple. Sensing potential rebellion, Quoc began cutting the pay of certain dealers and threatened to eliminate anyone who spoke out. This action fractured loyalty within the organization. A Laotian-American dealer, after being cheated out of his share by Quoc, secretly contacted authorities in Mississippi and revealed everything. As a result, during the 2006 meeting in Biloxi with an undercover agent, Quoc carelessly boasted about the entire scheme in front of a hidden camera. After that reckless self-incrimination, misfortune began to surround the Tran organization. At a casino in Washington, a colluding dealer was suddenly questioned by management and, in a panic, confessed everything. The information quickly reached the FBI. Authorities across multiple jurisdictions intensified surveillance. Although Quoc's group attempted to carry out a few final operations, the watchful eye of the law was already fixed on them. In May 2007, when they planned to return to Sichuan Casino, they were already blacklisted. The net closed on May 24, 2007, when 14 members of the Tran organization were arrested simultaneously across several states. The case was assigned to the United States District Court for the Southern District of California. Faced with overwhelming evidence, including video recordings, audio tapes, physical exhibits, and testimony from at least 5 insiders who had turned state witnesses, the defendants found it nearly impossible to deny the charges. Their legal strategy gradually shifted toward plea agreements in hopes of receiving leniency. Quoc initially maintained his innocence, but in April 2008, he pleaded guilty to conspiracy to participate in organized criminal activity for unlawful financial gain. Due to partial cooperation, he was offered a sentence below the maximum 20-year penalty. Ultimately, in March 2010, Quoc was sentenced to 70 months in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. He was also ordered to pay $5.75 million USD in restitution to the affected casinos and to forfeit numerous assets. Meanwhile, in February 2009, Tran admitted his involvement in the Tran organization and acknowledged earning approximately $1 million USD from the fraudulent schemes. Tycoon expressed remorse and provided detailed accounts from the formation of the organization to the specific casinos in which he and his accomplices had operated. As a result, his cooperation was taken into consideration for a reduced sentence. As for Van Thu Tran, she was initially defiant. She proclaimed her innocence and refused to plead guilty when indicted alongside her husband. However, after seeing that most co-defendants had pleaded guilty and were preparing to testify against her, Van Thu changed her position. On January 14, 2011, she formally pleaded guilty to conspiracy to participate in a fraudulent organization. In her plea agreement, Van Thu admitted that she, her husband, and their accomplices had established the Tran organization in August 2002 for the purpose of gambling fraud, with illicit profits totaling $7 million USD. On September 28, 2012, she was sentenced to 36 months in prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release, and ordered to pay $5.753 million USD in restitution, the same amount as her husband. The court also confiscated assets under Van Thu's name worth hundreds of thousands of USD. The 3-year sentence for this female mastermind surprised many observers, as it seemed relatively light given the scale of the case. However, informed sources suggested that Van Thu had actively cooperated with authorities after pleading guilty, possibly disclosing additional links in the network and hidden assets, which may have contributed to a sentence below the guideline range. Other accomplices received sentences proportionate to their level of involvement. George Michael Lee received 36 months in prison, Barry Welford, Son Johnson, and others were sentenced to several years. Some lower-level participants received one-year sentences, while a few were given suspended sentences and administrative fines. Mike Wasilewski, a dealer who had initially denied the charges, was tried separately in late 2010. A jury found him guilty, and he received approximately 5 years in prison. By 2012, a total of 42 out of 47 defendants had pleaded guilty to varying degrees of charges, while the remaining individuals were convicted later due to connections involving Canada. The trial concluded with costly lessons for the entire system. Phuong Quoc Trung and Vuong Thu Tran believed they had mastered a winning formula, yet in the end, they were defeated by justice. It stands as a stark reminder that the glamorous world of gambling can tempt people into reckless actions, but the long arm of the law is inescapable. No one can cheat forever. In the spring of the year 2020, as the COVID-19 pandemic erupted and pushed countless small businesses across the United States into turmoil, the federal government hastily launched relief programs on an unprecedented scale. Among the most notable were the Paycheck Protection Program and the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, designed to help businesses maintain payroll and survive the crisis. However, from the very first rounds of disbursement, signs of irregularities began to emerge. In July of the year 2020, a group of viewers of the ABC7 television channel, after reviewing the list of companies that received assistance, contacted reporters to raise questions about a series of highly suspicious businesses. Specifically, 4 companies, 88 Cloud Computing, 88 Enterprise Services, 88 Investment Empire, and 88 Venture Capital, all reported having exactly 48 employees. Each of these companies received between $350,000 and $1 million USD from the relief programs. The fact that multiple companies declared the exact same number of employees and repeatedly used the number 88 in their names immediately caught the attention of investigative journalists. Upon conducting a quick search of business registration records, the ABC7 News reporting team discovered that all 4 companies were owned by a single individual, Lebnitz Tran, aged 39, who was residing in the San Jose area of the state of California. Even more suspicious was the fact that all 4 companies mentioned above had only been established in May of the year 2020. Meanwhile, the rules of the Paycheck Protection Program clearly stated that businesses had to be operating before the 15th of February of the year 2020 to be eligible for a loan. This meant that Lebnitz Tran had deliberately set up companies after the pandemic began for the sole purpose of applying for relief funds, an act that blatantly violated the program's criteria. To clarify the situation, the reporters called Lebnitz Tran directly to verify the details. At first, he insisted that his businesses were completely legitimate. However, when he was asked to do an on-camera interview, Lebnitz began to evade the request, claiming he needed to consult his personal secretary, and then hurriedly hung up. This evasive attitude only further reinforced the investigative team's suspicions. Tracing the registered headquarters addresses Lebnitz had listed for his companies, the reporters uncovered a stark truth. It turned out the company headquarters was simply his mother's private home in Campbell, California, with no office and no signs of any business operations. When they went to the home registered under his name in San Jose, along with another property in Saratoga, they only encountered his relatives or friends. There was absolutely no sign of any company office, nor any employees as he had claimed. The media's findings were quickly forwarded to the authorities. In fact, the Small Business Administration and the FBI had been watching Lebnitz Tran even before the reporters contacted them. After all, one individual registering multiple companies in a short period of time and then requesting relief funds totaling millions of USD was clearly an abnormal red flag. In an interview, a representative of the Small Business Administration emphasized that the Paycheck Protection Program was intended exclusively for businesses that had been operating steadily before the pandemic, and therefore newly created companies like Lebnitz's were not qualified to receive the money. After the suspicions were confirmed, authorities launched an in-depth investigation into Lebnitz Tran's entire operation. According to investigative records, Lebnitz was accused of orchestrating an extremely elaborate fraud scheme from April through July of the year 2020, aimed at siphoning funds from business relief programs. To carry out this plot, he exploited every loophole by purchasing or borrowing the identities of existing businesses, while also rapidly setting up numerous new companies for the sole purpose of submitting relief applications. In each application packet, Lebnitz fabricated a wide range of false information to persuade banks and authorities to approve the loans. He did not hesitate to falsify the operating history of newly created companies, inflate employee counts to dozens of people, and report payroll expenses at wildly unrealistic levels. To boost credibility, Lebnitz also falsified tax filings and forged financial documents, complete with stamps made to look authentic. All of it was meant to paint a perfect picture of businesses supposedly desperate for capital and fully qualified to receive emergency relief. For each business under his control, Lebnitz submitted not just one, but multiple loan applications to different institutions. Investigators determined that Lebnitz Tran was behind at least 27 loan applications under the Paycheck Protection Program and 7 applications under the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. Whether submitted under his own name or using someone else's identity, all of the money ultimately remained under Lebnitz's direction. He targeted a total of about 8.5 million USD, and before being discovered, actually had more than 3.6 million USD approved. The remaining funds may have been denied or put on hold during the review process, but the 3.6 million USD he received was still enough to make the case one of the largest relief fraud scandals in California at the time. After deducting expenses, Lebnitz pocketed roughly 1.7 million USD in illicit profits from the scheme. Next, investigators traced the money trail to expose how Lebnitz used the stolen funds. As suspected, he did not use the money to pay employee wages or keep any business running. Instead, Lebnitz and those involved funneled the money into personal luxuries, dining at high-end restaurants, shopping at expensive stores, transferring funds into his personal stock investment accounts, and buying cryptocurrency. Not only that, Lebnitz splurged on a Tesla electric car worth $100,000, right in the middle of a time when millions of Americans were struggling through the pandemic. All of these expenses were clearly documented in bank statements and transaction records, becoming hard evidence of Lebnitz's motive for personal enrichment. Another notable detail was how Lebnitz chose the channel through which to file his loan applications. Instead of going through major banks with extremely strict verification procedures, he primarily submitted applications to online lenders, also known as lesser-known financial technology companies. Records show that at least 3 online platforms were heavily exploited by Lebnitz: Fundbox, Harvest, and Lendistry. These intermediaries helped connect businesses to the Paycheck Protection Program quickly. However, this convenience came with major screening loopholes, as business verification largely relied on algorithms and customers' self-reported information. These companies approved a combined total of more than 1 million USD for Lebnitz's 488 businesses in June of the year 2020 alone. This lax oversight was later fiercely criticized by federal officials, and the case of Lebnitz Tran came to be viewed as a textbook example of exploiting technological gaps to profit from relief funds. By mid-year 2021, federal investigators believed they had gathered sufficient, solid evidence to charge Lebnitz Tran. The case file was then forwarded to a federal grand jury in the Northern District of California, leading to a formal indictment being issued and paving the way for his arrest. On the 8th of July of the year 2021, more than a year after the fraud began, the Federal Bureau of Investigation officially launched an operation to arrest Lebnitz Tran. With court authorization, FBI agents raided his residence in San Jose in the early hours of the morning and carried out the arrest warrant. The following day, the United States Department of Justice issued an official announcement charging Lebnitz Tran, aged 40, with multiple allegations related to COVID-19 relief program fraud. According to the indictment that was made public, Lebnitz Tran faced a total of 9 criminal counts, including 6 counts of wire fraud and 3 counts of bank fraud. These charges accurately reflected how he exploited the internet, email, and financial institutions to steal government funds. If convicted on all counts, Lebnitz would face extremely severe penalties, up to 30 years in prison for each count of bank fraud and 20 years in prison for each count of wire fraud. In theory, the combined sentence could amount to hundreds of years in prison, a figure that underscored the authorities' zero-tolerance stance toward those who exploit a shared disaster for personal gain. Immediately after the arrest warrant was executed, all assets and bank accounts connected to Lebnitz Tran were swiftly frozen pending the court's final ruling. At the same time, authorities also seized the Tesla vehicle and many other luxury assets that Lebnitz had purchased with fraudulent funds, treating them as key evidence in the case. So who was Lebnitz Tran, really? When the case came to light, the public could not help but question the background and true motives of the figure behind this audacious fraud scheme. According to judicial sources, Lebnitz Tran was a Vietnamese American living in the city of San Jose, in the state of California. Investigative records indicated that Lebnitz was relatively well off, owning at least one home in San Jose and being linked to another property in Saratoga, an affluent area within Silicon Valley. As for his private life, there was little information available, as he kept a low profile and had no prior criminal record. Some acquaintances said that Lebnitz was knowledgeable in finance and technology, and that this expertise likely helped him seize the opportunity to profit as soon as the government began pouring relief funds into the economy. Lebnitz realized that the application procedures for the Paycheck Protection Program and the Disaster Loan Program were conducted primarily online and relied heavily on the applicant's sworn honesty. Meanwhile, regulators at the time were overwhelmed, making it difficult to thoroughly scrutinize each individual application. With the knowledge he already had, Lebnitz built a seemingly flawless fake profile for himself, portraying himself as the owner of multiple reputable businesses with dozens of employees and high revenue, supposedly hit hard by the pandemic. Lebnitz Tran's actions not only broke the law, but also constituted a grave moral violation. At a time when legitimate businesses were struggling to stay afloat and millions of workers were unemployed, Lebnitz, someone who was neither desperate nor impoverished, brazenly stole resources that should have gone to those truly in need. When the facade collapsed, Lebnitz Tran emerged as a super scammer of the COVID era, intelligent and highly calculating, yet contemptuous of the law and chillingly indifferent. The case of Lebnitz Tran was, in reality, only the tip of the iceberg amid the storm of fraud targeting pandemic relief funds. In the United States, when support packages such as the Paycheck Protection Program, disaster loan programs, unemployment benefits, and food relief were rolled out en masse, countless opportunists immediately rushed to exploit them for profit. According to a report from the Office of Inspector General published in June of the year 2023, as much as around 17% of the budgets of the 2 business support programs showed signs of fraud estimated at more than 200 billion USD in losses. Specifically, about 64 billion USD from the Paycheck Protection Program and 136 billion USD from disaster loan programs were suspected to have ended up in the hands of ineligible recipients or organized fraud rings. These staggering figures laid bare the brutal scale of a crisis within the pandemic itself, a fraud pandemic. In just a little over 2 years, more than 1,000 criminal prosecutions related to COVID-19 relief fraud were pursued across the United States, with 529 defendants convicted. Authorities recovered or froze nearly 30 billion USD in fraudulent funds from the Paycheck Protection Program and disaster loan programs, and that figure has continued to rise as investigations expanded. Lebnitz Tran was not the only person who used relief money to buy luxury cars. In fact, a string of other cases also shocked the public with similar storylines. For example, in May of the year 2020, a man in Florida named David Hines received 3.9 million USD in relief funds and immediately bought a Lamborghini Huracan worth $318,000, only to be arrested and later sentenced to 6 years in prison. In many other cases, defendants even used fraudulent money to purchase mansions, buy private aircraft, or indulge in lavish resort vacations. As a result, the United States Department of Justice described this as the largest fraud in a generation, with hundreds of billions of USD in aid stolen nationwide. Beyond the Paycheck Protection Program and disaster loan programs, many other relief funds were also drained at an alarming level. For instance, the Unemployment Benefits Program was defrauded of about 45.6 billion USD through tactics such as using the identities of deceased individuals or people who were not eligible to file benefit claims. Even worse, a scheme in the state of Minnesota ruthlessly siphoned off 250 million USD from food relief funds intended for underprivileged children, a case that once shook public opinion in the year 2022. These figures and incidents exposed a bitter dark side of the fight against COVID-19. Even as communities poured their hearts into helping one another, there were still people willing to profit unlawfully from society's shared pain. After being arrested and charged, Lebnitz Tran faced two choices: go to trial and confront all 9 counts, or negotiate a plea deal in exchange for a lighter sentence. With the evidence so clear, his attorneys understood that the chance of an acquittal was virtually zero. As a result, Lebnitz's side chose to negotiate a plea agreement with prosecutors. As a result, on the 30th of June of the year 2022, Lebnitz Tran formally pleaded guilty to 2 of the 6 wire fraud charges among the counts brought against him. In return, prosecutors agreed to drop the remaining charges, including 4 additional wire fraud counts and 3 bank fraud counts, on the condition that Lebnitz cooperate fully and commit no further violations. In court, Lebnitz admitted to the entire criminal conduct as described in the indictment, from setting up fake companies and falsifying documents to the 1.7 million USD he stole and how he spent that money. A federal judge in the Northern District of California then accepted the defendant's guilty plea. This meant that, without going through a lengthy trial, Lebnitz Tran was officially convicted of defrauding COVID, won 9 relief funds, totaling 3.6 million USD. After pleading guilty, Lebnitz Tran still faced the court's final sentencing decision. For the 2 wire fraud counts, each carried a maximum penalty of up to 20 years in prison. This meant Lebnitz could face a combined maximum sentence of 40 years in federal prison for the 2 offenses. However, the exact number would ultimately be determined by the judge under the federal sentencing guidelines, after carefully weighing aggravating and mitigating factors. In addition, the judge required Lebnitz to agree to repay at least 1.719 million USD, representing the full amount of illicit proceeds he had gained. This mandatory restitution was intended to reimburse the government and the dispersing agencies for the losses caused by Lebnitz's fraudulent conduct. In early November of the year 2022, federal court proceedings in Northern California officially entered the sentencing phase for Lebnitz Tran. Although the specific details of the punishment had not yet been formally announced, in light of the overwhelming evidence and the defendant's guilty plea, a harsh sentence was inevitable. This was not merely a legal punishment, but also a wake-up call for anyone harboring unlawful ambitions. Profiting from the community's suffering in a time of crisis not only faces the full force of the law, but also invites severe judgment from the public. The Lebnitz Tran case sent a strong message that no matter how sophisticated the tactics may be, justice will ultimately be served. From a broader perspective, the Lebnitz Tran case was not just an isolated criminal file. It became a representative precedent that prompted federal lawmakers to tighten oversight and control. After a wave of similar fraud cases was exposed, the United States government intensified post-disbursement investigations and reformed verification criteria, aiming to minimize the risk of relief funds continuing to fall into the hands of profiteers. In the end, Lebnitz Tran's story left behind a difficult question. In social emergencies, what should we do to stop profiteers while still ensuring timely support for those who truly need it? Share your thoughts in the comments below. In the fall of 2023, investors in Inventus, a Tustin, California-based investment company, suddenly noticed that they were no longer receiving their regular returns. After repeatedly questioning the two leaders, Mrs. Lin Tui-Lei and Mr. Trong Huang Lu, they were told that Inventus had temporarily suspended payouts due to bank audits and regulatory compliance issues. Additionally, a notice on the Win on Wealth website at the time blamed requirements from banking regulators for forcing Inventus to halt operations. Shortly afterward, Mrs. Lei encouraged investors to redirect their funds into other projects such as Apex Bank and Trade Technologies Limited. These vague explanations left many investors suspicious. Some immediately began filing complaints with the Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI. Others joined together to hire attorneys and file a civil lawsuit against Mrs. Lin and her husband in a California court in 2024, determined to recover their lost money. Unexpectedly, these actions tore away the veil of secrecy surrounding what had long been presented as the reputable Inventus investment company, gradually revealing truths that would shock the entire United States. Recognizing the seriousness of the case, especially when the company dared to blame regulators despite no actual issues occurring at the time, the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission quietly launched an investigation. Federal investigators coordinated with the FBI, along with agencies such as the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, CFTC, and the California Department of Financial Protection and Innovation, to trace the evidence. They began by analyzing financial flows, subpoenaing bank records of Inventus, as well as the personal accounts of Lei and Lu. This led to the discovery of unusually large transfers used to purchase assets and pay brokers. Emails and internal messages were also secretly collected, allowing investigators to uncover the promises Mrs. Lei had made to employees and clients. Initially, the FBI considered the possibility that this Vietnamese-American couple had converted investor funds into cryptocurrency. If that were the case, blockchain analysts would have been required. However, after further investigation, they determined that no cryptocurrency was involved, only cash transactions and bank transfers. As a result, the investigation focused on forensic financial auditing. By comparing the monthly payouts received by victims with incoming and outgoing funds, investigators quickly identified a familiar fraud scheme, a Ponzi scheme. In essence, Inventus had no real source of profit other than money contributed by new investors. As for the new projects Mrs. Lei encouraged investors to fund, the FBI discovered that both were already entangled in legal trouble. Specifically, Apex Bank had been ordered to cease operations by the Georgia Department of Banking due to multiple violations, while Trade Technologies faced securities fraud lawsuits in California and Texas. Clearly, the couple was moving investors from one trap to another, and every trap was the same. The investigation continued quietly for nearly 2 years. By September 2025, a sealed indictment was approved by a federal grand jury, formally charging Lin Tui-Lei and Trong Huang Lu with multiple offenses. The indictment, spanning dozens of pages, detailed how they defrauded more than 1,400 investors across the country through a fraudulent investment program. One excerpt from the indictment stated that Inventus was marketed as an invitation-only business lending program promising safe investments with high returns. But in reality, funds from new investors were used to pay returns to earlier investors, cover operational expenses, and purchase assets for the defendants themselves. By mid-October 2025, when all the pieces had come together, law enforcement took coordinated action. On October 15, 2025, FBI agents raided the couple's residence in Yorba Linda and arrested Lin Tui-Lei and Trong Huang Lu. On the same day, the SEC filed a civil lawsuit in the U.S. District Court for the Central District of California, officially announcing fraud charges against the pair. The event immediately shocked the community. Local media ran headlines calling it the largest fraud case ever within the Vietnamese community in the United States. Meanwhile, the Vietnamese community reacted with outrage and disbelief, as no one had imagined that these seemingly successful business figures, once seen as a source of pride, would turn out to be individuals profiting from the suffering of their own people. According to the investigation, Lin Tui-Lei, 59 years old, and Trong Huang Lu, 58 years old, are a Vietnamese-American couple who have lived in the United States for decades. They resided in Yorba Linda, a prosperous city in Orange County, California. Before becoming entangled in legal trouble, Mrs. Lei was widely trusted as a financial expert. Some sources indicate that she previously worked in life insurance and community financial services. Her former insurance client network became the first leads for their Ponzi scheme. Mr. Liu, her husband, maintained a lower public profile but served as the chief financial officer, CFO, directly managing cash flow and accounting. In other words, Lei was the public face, while Liu was the brain behind operations, a perfect combination to build trust within the community before exploiting it. In the eyes of many, the Lei-Liu couple once represented the ideal of successful entrepreneurs. They lived in a luxurious villa, drove expensive cars, and projected the image of prosperous investors. They were also active in community activities, cultivating a reputation as a generous couple who often helped others. As a result, when they presented investment opportunities promising high returns, few people questioned them. Their social standing and personal credibility created an aura that completely disarmed their victims. The couple, Lin Tui Lei and Trong Huang Liu, established multiple shell companies under the name Inventus to create a professional facade for investors, including Inventus Ventures, LLC, and Inventus Ventures Holding, incorporated in California, as well as entities in Utah and other legal structures. In early 2022, Mrs. Lei also registered a business called Wow Win on Wealth, which was actually the name of the investment program they promoted. On the surface, Inventus Ventures promoted itself as a reputable investment firm based in Tustin, California, specializing in safe, high-return investments with monthly payouts. They described Inventus as an invite-only capital lending program, elegantly framed as funding businesses in exchange for high-interest returns. To attract investors, Lei and Liu did not rely on mass advertising, but instead leveraged trusted social networks. They utilized connections within Vietnamese and Latino communities, organizing private presentations via Zoom or in-person meetings at their Tustin office and home. According to the indictment, most victims were recruited through word of mouth or referrals from existing investors, meaning each participant inadvertently became an ambassador, inviting friends and acquaintances to invest in exchange for commissions. In fact, commissions paid within the system were extremely generous, totaling approximately 1.5 million USD. This policy allowed their Ponzi scheme to expand exponentially within the community, as early participants eagerly recruited new ones with promises of easy profits. The couple's main tactic was offering unbelievable yet highly convincing returns. With a minimum investment of $5,000, investors were promised 15% monthly interest and full return of principal after 12 months. If they chose to accumulate the interest instead of receiving monthly payouts, they were told returns could reach 360% per year, meaning their money would nearly quadruple within a year. These returns were guaranteed as safe, risk-free, and even insured. To build trust, they provided vague explanations for such extraordinary profits, claiming investments in high-potential startups, real estate, health insurance, and even boasting access to a secret bank offering 40% interest. Each investor signed a one-year loan agreement, which could be renewed upon maturity, effectively keeping funds within the system. Notably, Mrs. Lei encouraged investors to contribute in cash for operational convenience. This preference for cash or informal transfers helped them avoid leaving clear transaction trails, making it more difficult for victims and investigators to trace the money. Alongside these false promises, the group created a facade of legitimacy through documents that were either fake or legally meaningless. Each participant signed a contract lending capital to Inventus, a document stamped with a company's seal, clearly stating interest rates and terms, appearing highly professional. The company also sent periodic profit reports to investors, showing accumulated interest exactly as promised, reinforcing their trust. Many Vietnamese victims, holding these contracts in hand, believed they had secured a winning investment. In reality, the entire system was a disguised Ponzi scheme, using money from new investors to pay earlier ones, while the remaining funds were siphoned off by Lei and Liu for their lavish lifestyle. Through personal credibility and cunning tactics, Lei and Liu created a chain trust effect. Early investors, friends, and former insurance clients, after receiving initial payouts, became highly convinced and began recruiting others. A collective sense of agreement formed, making people fear missing out on a lucrative opportunity. From a criminological perspective, this is a classic tactic of exploiting community trust, where fraudsters use victims' own social networks as tools rather than relying on coercion or public advertising. It is possible that at first, Lei and Liu intended to raise funds for legitimate business purposes, but greed quickly led them down a criminal path. After all, a 15% monthly return is unrealistic both in theory and in practice. However, like many financial criminals, they found ways to rationalize their actions. In the beginning, when new funds were flowing steadily, they did pay investors as promised, creating the illusion that the business model was functioning smoothly. This may have even deceived themselves into believing the scheme could continue indefinitely. According to criminal psychology experts, the Li-Lu couple exhibited two clear traits: illusion of control and complicit role division. Regarding the illusion of control, they believed they were smarter than others and could manipulate the Ponzi cash flow to generate endless profits. Even after Inventus encountered problems in late 2023, Mrs. Les still failed to recognize the reality. The evidence is clear. By the end of that year, when the Win on Wealth WOW program had to stop paying returns, Les Group was still reassuring investors that they would soon launch a new program in March 2024 to continue helping people make money. This boldness showed they had no intention of stopping and still arrogantly believed they could outsmart the legal system. In terms of accomplice roles, within this scheme, Lin Tui Lei acted as the direct mastermind, the central figure. She was the one meeting investors, persuading them, and providing misleading information to draw in their money. Meanwhile, Trong Huang Lu played an active supporting role. He clearly knew his wife was making false claims, yet he quietly supported the operation behind the scenes by legitimizing payouts and commissions, allowing the fraudulent model to persist for a long time without raising suspicion. This tight coordination made accountability very clear. Both husband and wife were co-conspirators, leaving little room for either to deny responsibility or shift blame. In fact, court records show they were charged equally across all counts. As for their motive, it is not difficult to identify: greed and a desire for status. The money they obtained was used to fund a lavish lifestyle. They enjoyed being praised as skilled investors and respected by others for their wealth. Some victims even admired them as people who helped the community get rich. Such admiration may have fueled their criminal ego, blinding them to any sense of limits. This explains why, even under investigation, Mrs. Li continued to deceive people until the very end, repeatedly assuring them that the program was only temporarily suspended due to banking issues, and advising them to redirect investments into other companies like Apex or Trade, as if acting in their best interest. It can be said that this couple had completely lost their moral boundaries, becoming trapped in the fraudulent world they created. From a criminological perspective, the case of Lin Tui Lei and Trong Huang Lu is a classic example of white-collar crime within immigrant communities. They were intelligent, possessed enough financial knowledge to devise schemes, deeply understood their community's culture to exploit trust, and above all, were ruthless enough to deceive even those who trusted them most. From once being admired as successful investors, Lei and Lu are now exposed as seasoned fraudsters who betrayed everyone around them for personal gain. The scale of this fraud was enormous, both in the number of victims and the total amount of money involved. More than 1,400 people fell victim, primarily in California and other Vietnamese communities across the United States. According to court estimates, the total amount raised by Lei and Lu was at least between $26.5 million USD and $27.5 million USD. However, the actual figure may be even higher, as many transactions were conducted in cash or through informal channels, making them difficult to fully trace. Of this massive sum, the couple personally pocketed approximately 7.4 million USD. The remaining funds were used to pay around $16.5 million US in returns to earlier investors to maintain trust, and about 1.5 million USD in commissions to intermediaries who recruited new participants. A smaller portion was spent on Inventus operations, such as office rentals and events to maintain the appearance of legitimacy. Inventus's cash flow was circulated through a complex network of accounts and companies. Initially, most funds were deposited into the account of Inventus Ventures Holding Incorporated, managed by Lu. As the chief financial officer, Lu signed over 95% of the checks issued from the company's account. Of these, 96% were used to pay Ponzi-style returns to investors and brokers, demonstrating that the majority of funds were never directed into any legitimate investment activities. Additional cash was deposited into the personal accounts of Lei and Lu or into satellite companies they established, such as Inventus Ventures Incorporated and Inventus Elite Trust. They even instructed some investors to set up their own companies and open business accounts to deposit funds in order to avoid bank scrutiny. All these tactics made tracing financial transactions extremely difficult, prolonging the investigation. The core of any Ponzi scheme lies in spending the stolen money, and this case was no exception. Lin Tui Lei and Trong Huang Lu used investor funds to build a lavish lifestyle. According to the indictment, they purchased 2 luxury mansions in Yorba Linda, a wealthy city in Orange County, as well as a beachfront penthouse in Huntington Beach. These properties, worth millions of USD, clearly demonstrated how investor money was funneled into the couple's personal assets. In addition, they indulged in extravagant spending, buying expensive furniture, luxury cars, jewelry, and funding vacations, essentially living like royalty on the hard-earned money of others. The flow of money revealed both the sophistication and recklessness of the couple. They encouraged cash transactions, used multiple shell companies, and converted funds into tangible assets such as real estate to launder money. When the system began to falter, Lei and Lu attempted to mislead investors by directing them toward other projects like Apex Bank and Trade Technologies Limited, names that appeared independent but were actually extensions of the original Inventus scheme. It is clear that the couple tried to shift funds when Inventus was in trouble, attempting to prolong the life of the scam. In the end, however, these were merely desperate final movements of a collapsing financial scheme. The initial reaction of victims upon discovering the truth was shock and disbelief. Many could not accept that acquaintances and fellow community members had orchestrated such an elaborate fraud. This was followed by anger and frustration both toward the perpetrators and toward themselves for being too trusting. Those who had introduced friends and relatives into the scheme felt even greater guilt, realizing that their trust had contributed to others losing money as well. Some families and friendships were damaged as a result. Those who had made referrals felt ashamed and avoided others, while those who had been invited grew resentful, even demanding accountability from the person who introduced them. This created deep fractures within the community, leaving wounds that may be difficult to heal. The financial consequences were severe. Many victims, especially older individuals nearing retirement, lost their financial security entirely. Retirement savings, college funds for children and grandchildren, and future plans all vanished. One woman in San Diego shared that she lost $30,000 her savings for early retirement. She now has to continue working, cut expenses, and may never feel confident investing again. Some Vietnamese American small business owners even withdrew capital from their businesses to lend to Inventus. When the money was lost, their businesses suffered, forcing layoffs or closure. This demonstrates that the economic domino effect of this fraud was far-reaching and deeply damaging. However, amid these losses, a glimmer of hope emerged. The victims began to unite. They formed groups on social media to share information, support one another, and collectively push for justice. One group hired attorneys and filed a class action lawsuit in a California court in late 2024, seeking to freeze the assets of Lei and Lu for restitution. When the FBI called for victims to come forward, hundreds stepped up to provide testimony. This cooperation helped authorities strengthen their case and build a more solid foundation for prosecution. Victims also applied pressure through the media by reaching out to newspapers and local television stations to share their stories, turning the case into a major public focus. As a result, others who had remained silent began to come forward, fully exposing the crimes of the Vietnamese American couple. After their arrest, Lin Tui Lei and Trong Huang Lu were quickly processed under the federal criminal justice system. The indictment, approved by a federal grand jury on September 17, 2025, listed multiple serious charges against both defendants, including wire fraud and money laundering, along with additional financial fraud-related offenses. Each wire fraud charge carries a maximum penalty of 20 years in federal prison, while money laundering also carries up to 20 years. If convicted on all counts, in theory, each could face decades behind bars. Given that both are nearly 60 years old, such a sentence would effectively amount to life imprisonment, forcing them to spend the remainder of their lives in prison. While criminal proceedings are underway, the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, is simultaneously pursuing civil actions. The SEC is seeking a permanent injunction to bar Lei and Lu from participating in securities activities or raising capital in any form in the future. At the same time, the SEC is demanding full disgorgement of illegally obtained funds along with civil penalties. The civil court may freeze bank accounts and seize real estate purchased with fraudulent money, later auctioning these assets to compensate victims. However, the outcome of the civil case often depends on the criminal verdict. If the defendants are convicted, the SEC is almost certain to prevail. According to the timeline, the criminal case will enter the evidence exchange phase in the coming months. There may also be plea negotiations between the parties. However, given the masштаб of the case, prosecutors are likely to pursue full prosecution to set a strong deterrent example. Although the final verdict is still pending, it is clear that a severe sentence awaits the defendants, a message that justice will ultimately be served for more than 1,400 victims. In April 2022, German authorities dismantled Hydra, the largest darknet marketplace for illegal drugs and stolen data. Within the massive amount of data recovered from Hydra's servers, investigators discovered numerous anonymous Bitcoin transactions flowing into a service known as Chip Mixer. Immediately, suspicion arose. Could Chip Mixer be the final laundering hub for dirty money originating from Hydra and other criminal sources? Around the same time, blockchain analysis companies such as Elliptic and TRM Labs also warned authorities about the suspicious platform. Their reports revealed that Chip Mixer had laundered hundreds of millions USD in Bitcoin originating from illegal activities, including at least 666 million USD linked to cryptocurrency theft. These independent reports strengthened suspicions that Chip Mixer was a major node in a massive money laundering network. Recognizing the scale of the case, the FBI Philadelphia field office quickly coordinated with Europol to launch an international investigation. The operation was assigned a dedicated codename and involved multiple major law enforcement agencies, including the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, the US, Homeland Security Investigations, HSI, the German Federal Criminal Police Office, BKA, as well as police forces from Poland, Belgium, and Switzerland. On the analysts' desks, a series of questions quickly emerged. Who was behind Chip Mixer? Where were its servers located? And, most importantly, who was operating the service? These unanswered questions set the stage for a complex global investigation, beginning with the elusive digital footprint of Chip Mixer across the hidden corners of the darknet. The first obstacle facing investigators was as daunting as a mountain. Chip Mixer operated on the darknet, collected no user information, and was not registered as a business in any country. All transactions were conducted without real names or physical addresses. It even deliberately avoided legal oversight by refusing to register with FinCEN, the US, Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, and ignoring KYC regulations, Know Your Customer Identity Verification. However, investigators did not give up. After many days of searching, they discovered that although Chip Mixer hid on Tor, it had previously owned a ClearNet domain accessible through the regular web. When searching domain registration databases, they found that the domain chipmixer.com had been registered in August 2017. The registrant used Western-sounding names, such as James Smith or James Hall, along with a foreign address that appeared to be fabricated. It was clear that these were aliases used by the operator to conceal their real identity. Even so, experts noticed an important clue. The email address used for the domain registration was hosted by Proton Mail, a provider known for strong privacy protection. Through international cooperation, investigators requested assistance from Switzerland, the country where Proton Mail is based, to extract related information. The results did not immediately reveal the culprit's identity, but they showed that the email Chip Mixer @ had been linked to several other accounts bearing the name Quoc Minh, a detail suggesting that the person behind this money laundering empire might have Asian origins. At the same time, the FBI deployed its cyber investigation units to analyze every small digital trace from the source code of the Chip Mixer website to writing styles on online forums, and even the administrator's activity schedule. One crucial discovery emerged. Between 2017 and 2022, most Chip Mixer activity followed Asian time zones. More specifically, data suggested that the operator frequently logged in from the Hanoi, Vietnam region, at least between September 2016 and March 2022. This breakthrough narrowed the scope of the investigation to Vietnam. However, since the exact identity was still unconfirmed, investigators continued piecing together additional clues. They began examining posts on the Bitcoin Talk forum where the Chip Mixer operator had previously been active. As expected, an account with a similar name had written numerous posts since 2017, displaying a very distinctive tone, openly criticizing anti-money laundering laws and mocking cryptocurrency exchanges that complied with KYC requirements. In one post from October 2017, the user boldly declared, "Money laundering is a crime invented by governments to spy on people." These statements closely match the ideology expressed by the operator of ChipMixer. The account also mentioned that the service had been targeted by DDoS attacks, and explained why it refused to use Cloudflare, a well-known DDoS protection service, fearing that doing so could reveal the server's real location. From these clues, investigators began forming a preliminary profile of the suspect, someone with deep knowledge of cryptocurrency, holding strong anti-regulation views regarding financial laws, and most likely operating alone, or at most with a very small team. As the veil slowly lifted, the investigation reached a turning point. Thanks to cooperation between multiple international law enforcement agencies, the FBI obtained data from several other related online services. In the end, all the clues converged on a single name, Minh Nguyen. This name appeared repeatedly across multiple data sources, from an email address beginning with Quoc to records of a Vietnamese PhD graduate from Taiwan in 2016, and even administrative databases. When investigators compared all the information, they realized that every piece fit together with remarkable precision. There was no longer any doubt the person the FBI was searching for was Minh Nguyen, born in 1973, a Vietnamese citizen. Now, the true identity of the ghost behind ChipMixer had finally emerged. Investigators moved quickly to gather additional evidence to strengthen the case file. They discovered several other aliases used by Nguyen, including James Smith, David Minh, and Minh Nguyen Quoc. Notably, academic records showed that Nguyen was far from ordinary. He held a PhD in electronic engineering from Taiwan, a level of expertise consistent with the technical sophistication required to build a platform like ChipMixer. More importantly, documents confirmed that Nguyen was indeed the creator of ChipMixer. He registered the domain names, rented the servers, and paid for these services using stolen identities and anonymous email accounts. From there, he built ChipMixer into a laundering service used by major criminal groups around the world. At this point, the investigation entered an accelerated phase aimed at exposing the mastermind behind the operation. In early 2023, an international operation was carefully planned. In the United States, the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia quietly prepared formal charges. On March 14, 2023, FBI Special Agent Stephen Parker submitted a 60-page criminal complaint to the court. The indictment detailed Minh Nguyen's alleged crimes, including money laundering, operating an unlicensed money transmitting business, and identity theft, under U.S. federal criminal law. These are extremely serious charges carrying a potential maximum sentence of up to 40 years in prison if convicted. Meanwhile, European authorities, led by Germany and Europol, prepared to dismantle the infrastructure of ChipMixer. The final steps were coordinated carefully. Germany would handle the seizure of the physical servers since they were located on German territory, while the United States would lead the legal prosecution and the seizure of domain names and digital assets. Europol served as the central intelligence hub, connecting investigative data from multiple countries to ensure that no clues were overlooked. In addition, countries such as Belgium, Poland, and Switzerland deployed specialists to assist with cryptocurrency analysis and verification of information within their jurisdictions. On March 15, 2023, after months of secret preparation, law enforcement agencies launched the operation simultaneously. At a data center in Frankfurt, Germany, special police units raided the facility and successfully seized 4 servers identified as the heart of ChipMixer. What investigators discovered inside the digital crime scene was staggering. Nearly 1,909.4 Bitcoin, worth approximately 44.2 million euros, were confiscated in just 55 transactions, along with 7 terabytes of stored data. Computer specialists immediately began analyzing this massive trove of data. What they uncovered was astonishing. ChipMixer truly functioned as a large-scale money laundering factory, organized with remarkable technical sophistication. From the very beginning, the system showed clear signs that the perpetrator had carefully designed it to conceal all traces of his identity. The servers operated as hidden services on the Tor network, masking their real IP addresses. Transaction data was encrypted, and funds were broken into small digital units called chips, which were then mixed together to obscure their origins. Investigators quickly recorded several critical clues, including lists of Bitcoin wallets that had been used for mixing transactions, the chat history and forum posts of the service administrator, and possibly even information about additional servers or related accounts. Regarding its operational mechanism, ChipMixer used an algorithm that automatically mixed incoming and outgoing transactions, making it nearly impossible to trace the origin of the cryptocurrency. This allowed customers to conceal the source of illegal funds. For example, criminals could purchase illicit goods from darknet marketplaces or hide the origin of payments obtained through ransomware attacks without fear of being detected. Because it appeared so secure, the platform quickly became a preferred destination for numerous major criminal networks around the world. A clearer picture gradually emerged. ChipMixer operated on a global scale, serving many criminal clients, and its operator was clearly highly skilled in technology as well as extremely sophisticated in remaining hidden. Evidence analysis was carried out urgently after ChipMixer was dismantled on March 15, 2023. From the 7 terabytes of data collected, technicians reconstructed the transaction history of the platform and found that approximately 152,000 Bitcoin had been processed through the service between 2017 and 2023, with an estimated value of about $3 billion USD. Investigators categorized these transactions by origin and discovered links to numerous major criminal cases. These included 37 ransomware variants, such as Revel, Soda no Kibi, Mamba, Dharma, and Lockbit, with about 17 million USD in ransom payments laundered. They also identified more than 700 million USD in Bitcoin connected to major cryptocurrency thefts, including the Ronin bridge hack of Axie Infinity and the Horizon bridge hack of Harmony. Additionally, more than 200 million USD came from darknet marketplaces, including approximately 60 million USD sent by customers of Hydra Market, along with another 35 million USD originating from fraudulent online shops, selling stolen credit card data and other compromised information. Investigators even discovered traces of Bitcoin transactions linked to a Russian state-sponsored hacking group which had used ChipMixer to purchase infrastructure for the Drovorub spyware. There was also evidence showing that the Lazarus Group, a hacking organization associated with North Korea, carried out the historic theft from the Ronin Bridge of Axie Infinity in March 2022, stealing approximately 173,600 ETH and 25.5 million USDC, worth more than 600 million USD. To move such a massive amount of stolen assets, the Lazarus Group used multiple laundering methods. They transferred funds through Tornado Cash, an Ethereum mixing service, and converted part of the stolen assets into Bitcoin before sending them into ChipMixer. Some reports suggest that at least 21 million USD from the Ronin hack alone was routed through ChipMixer. Those are truly staggering numbers, aren't they? These enormous figures became powerful evidence confirming that ChipMixer had served as a laundering tool for numerous dangerous criminal organizations worldwide, further reinforcing the seriousness of the charges against Minh Nguyen. In addition, the FBI possessed public statements made by Nguyen on online forums that demonstrated his intent to assist customers in laundering money. For example, he once advised users, "Don't use KYC exchanges, use ChipMixer to avoid reporting requirements." These statements showed that Nguyen clearly understood he was helping criminals launder money and had deliberately designed the platform to support that purpose. From this point, the FBI's cybercriminal profiling unit began outlining the suspect's psychology and habits based on his public statements. They described a man who was intelligent and deeply knowledgeable about cryptography, yet strongly anti-establishment. His motives may have stemmed from an extreme ideology about financial freedom combined with an insatiable greed. Notably, Nguyen appeared to be operating alone, without the backing of any organized criminal syndicate. This detail made the case even more remarkable. A lone cybercriminal, using only his intelligence and computers to challenge the international legal system. However, this information also helped investigators narrow their focus specifically on Nguyen rather than suspecting a larger criminal organization behind the operation. Soon afterward, the FBI placed Nguyen on its wanted list and urged anyone with information about him to report it to the nearest law enforcement agency. What shocked many observers was not only that a global money laundering hub had been run by a single individual serving criminals worldwide, but also that the mastermind behind it was a Vietnamese citizen holding a doctoral degree. This was highly unusual, as previous major cryptocurrency laundering cases were typically led by Western suspects. For example, the bestmixer.io case dismantled in 2019 involved 3 Dutch suspects. The revelation sparked considerable discussion even within the Vietnamese public. On March 15, 2023, the United States Department of Justice officially announced the indictment against Minh Quoc. Less than a week later, the Vietnamese Ministry of Foreign Affairs issued a statement confirming that authorities were verifying and investigating the case involving Minh Quoc, Nguyen, emphasizing that Vietnam is committed to cooperating in the fight against high-tech crime. Although Nguyen had not yet been apprehended, the investigation had effectively uncovered the mastermind and dismantled the entire laundering infrastructure. The coordinated cooperation among agencies including the FBI, the US, Department of Homeland Security, Europol, and prosecutors in Frankfurt demonstrated the power of cross-border law enforcement collaboration. This operation was considered a significant victory, sending a clear message. No matter where cybercriminals hide behind their screens, they cannot evade the persistence and international cooperation of law enforcement forever. Notably, the case unfolded against the backdrop of the cryptocurrency boom of the late 2010s. From 2017 to 2023, the cryptocurrency market expanded at an extraordinary pace, accompanied by a surge in illicit activities across cyberspace. In the underground world, cryptocurrency mixing services emerged as tools that allowed criminals to obscure blockchain transaction trails, creating major challenges for investigators. This was also the era of powerful darknet marketplaces, such as Hydra Market in Eastern Europe, and state-sponsored hacking groups, including Lazarus of North Korea, which carried out large-scale cryptocurrency thefts. The chip mixer case also served as a warning about the darker side of cryptocurrency technology. Tools like mixers, while not inherently illegal, can seriously undermine financial transparency when used by criminals, complicating the global fight against money laundering and terrorist financing. The public began to realize that blockchain does not always guarantee traceability, because sophisticated concealment services like ChipMixer can still operate in the shadows. Confidence in cryptocurrency was also shaken to some extent when media reports emphasized that more than $3 billion in illicit funds, including money stolen from legitimate crypto projects, had been successfully laundered. Consider the victims harmed by criminals who relied on ChipMixer. These could include businesses and individuals targeted by ransomware attacks, forced to pay millions of USD in ransom just to regain access to their data, only for those ransom payments to be funneled through ChipMixer and vanish without a trace. The victims also include gamers and investors of a blockchain-based game, Axie Infinity, who were stunned when 620 million USD was stolen by North Korean hackers, with tens of millions of USD from that theft quickly laundered through ChipMixer. There were even innocent victims worldwide indirectly affected when criminals trafficking illegal content used ChipMixer to hide their financial trails. Society at large also became a victim, because money from drug trafficking and illegal arms trading could be cleaned and reintroduced into everyday economic life. One notable example occurred in 2022, when the Ronin Bridge of Axie Infinity, operated by a Vietnamese company, was hacked and lost more than 600 million USD. This historic cryptocurrency theft left tens of thousands of players and investors as victims. When investigators traced the stolen funds, they discovered that a significant portion, about 35 million USD, had been sent by the Lazarus hackers into ChipMixer to erase its trail. As a result, that money became nearly impossible to recover, leaving the game company and its players with devastating financial losses. Similarly, during the years 2019 through 2021, numerous hospitals and schools in the United States paid ransom in Bitcoin to ransomware groups such as Sodano Kibi and Suncrypt. Much of that Bitcoin later disappeared after passing through ChipMixer. Up to the present time, no trial has been held for Minh Quoc Nguyen because he has not yet been apprehended. However, the legal process began in March 2023 with a federal indictment filed in the United States District Court for the Eastern District of Pennsylvania. This indictment allows authorities to issue an international arrest warrant for Nguyen. Regardless of what happens next, the cat-and-mouse game with Nguyen has entered its final stage. He has shifted from being an anonymous hacker into a fugitive. In addition, on March 23, 2023, a spokesperson for the Vietnamese Ministry of Foreign Affairs stated that authorities would investigate and take action if Nguyen was found to have violated Vietnamese law. This means Nguyen cannot live peacefully in the open. He must evade capture on two fronts, avoiding arrest by United States authorities while also avoiding potential prosecution in Vietnam. Since then, however, Nguyen has disappeared from public view. Some rumors claim he may be hiding somewhere in Vietnam, possibly in another province under a false identity. Whether these rumors are true or not, one fact remains certain. Minh Nguyen is now living like a traveler caught between two lines of legal fire with an uncertain future ahead. His life story, from a talented PhD to a globally wanted cybercriminal, resembles a modern tragedy, where brilliance becomes lost in the temptations of digital fame and cryptocurrency wealth. In early November 2025, at Singapore's Changi Airport, authorities intercepted a suspicious shipment transiting from South Africa. Inside wooden crates labeled as furniture accessories, security officers detected an unusual odor. Upon closer inspection, they were shocked to discover objects resembling animal horns, along with bones, teeth, and claws concealed within. In total, 20 rhino horns weighing 35.7 kilograms were seized, marking the largest rhino horn bust in Singapore's history. Additionally, approximately 150 kilograms of other animal parts, believed to be lion and tiger bones, were also found in the shipment. The shipment was quickly identified as originating from South Africa and destined for Vientiane, Laos. It was clearly a sophisticated link in an international wildlife trafficking network. All information was immediately relayed to South African authorities, where a multi-agency investigation was swiftly launched, involving the Wildlife Trafficking Investigation Unit, Customs, and the Border Management Authority. The first lead came from the sender's address listed on the shipment. After the seized rhino horns were returned to South Africa, authorities quickly traced the origin to a storage facility in Kempton Park, a suburb of Johannesburg. When authorities raided this warehouse, they discovered 4 wooden crates filled with evidence. Inside were 17 rhino horns weighing a total of 55.4 kilograms, along with 26.2 kilograms of lion and tiger bones, skulls, and claws. These staggering figures indicated a smuggling operation of massive scale, far beyond the actions of individual poachers. At the scene, police subdued and arrested 2 Nigerian suspects, Tunji Olanrewaju Koyi, 35 years old, and Koyode Adukunle Ongundele, 43 years old. Both were identified as individuals who were expected to receive the illegal shipment in South Africa. The capture of these suspects marked a significant breakthrough in the investigation, but it also raised numerous questions. Where had such a large quantity of rhino horns and animal parts originated, and who was truly orchestrating this sophisticated operation? The answer began to emerge just 1 week later, when South African authorities received a report of a daring robbery at Voi Game Lodge, a private wildlife farm owned by a Vietnamese businessman. According to the report, an armed group had broken into the property and stolen 98 rhino horns stored there. At first glance, the incident appeared to be a bold robbery carried out by local criminal gangs. However, experienced investigators immediately noticed irregularities. Specifically, many details of the stolen items closely matched those found in the previously seized shipment. As a result, they suspected this was not a random robbery. Instead, it appeared to be a carefully staged cover-up designed to legitimize the disappearance of a large number of rhino horns from the farm. From this point, the initial clues were quickly connected into a broader picture. The shipment routed through Singapore, the secret warehouse in Johannesburg, and the alleged robbery at Voi Game Lodge were all closely linked. Behind this chain of events was a highly organized transcontinental smuggling network involving multiple actors spanning from Africa to Asia. And gradually, the central figure behind the entire operation came into view. It was a Vietnamese businessman named Chu Dang Khoa, also known as Michael Chu or the Diamond Tycoon, who was the owner of Voi Game Lodge. After identifying Chu Dang Khoa as a potential key figure, South African authorities quickly coordinated with international organizations and Vietnamese partners to expand the investigation. According to information from Education for Nature Vietnam, a non-governmental organization, Chu Dong Khoa had long been on the radar of international law enforcement. The global conservation community had for years regarded this man as a kingpin, believed to be behind one of the world's most notorious trafficking networks. He had been linked to numerous allegations involving the smuggling of large quantities of rhino horns and tiger bones from Africa to Asia. However, until late 2025, Khoa had remained extremely elusive, leaving no solid evidence for authorities to issue an arrest warrant. It was only after the incident at Voi Game Lodge that a crucial link emerged. The suspected staged robbery provided investigators with key evidence connecting Khoa to the recently seized shipment of rhino horns. Investigators began to suspect that the 98 horns reported as stolen were actually the source of the contraband prepared for international trafficking. Authorities immediately employed advanced forensic methods, conducting DNA analysis on the seized horns and carefully comparing them with South Africa's rhino horn database. Preliminary results revealed a match between the horns seized in Singapore and records from Voi Game Lodge. In other words, the horns reported stolen from Khoa's farm were almost certainly the same items found in the international smuggling shipment. Alongside forensic analysis, the investigation gradually uncovered the financial flows and personnel network behind the operation. Voi Game Lodge, owned by Chu Dong Khoa, was officially registered as a legal wildlife breeding facility, holding permits to raise rhinos and tigers on site. However, the facility was accused of exploiting this legal cover to conduct illicit activities, including staging hunts and secretly funneling rare animal products into the black market. Further details about the trafficking routes and methods were also exposed. Rhino horns and other wildlife products were typically consolidated in South Africa, then transported by air through transit hubs such as Singapore or Malaysia, before reaching final destinations in the Indochina region, including Laos or Vietnam. The concealment methods were highly sophisticated. The contraband was treated with odor-masking chemicals, tightly wrapped in foil or plastic, and hidden deep within shipments of goods such as timber, stone, or tea to evade scanners and detection dogs. Through a web of interconnected links, the identities of key intermediaries gradually came to light. One notable figure was a Vietnamese man named Tran Huy Bao, 52 years old. He was believed to manage operations for DKC Trading, a front company owned by Chu Dong Khoa in South Africa. Bao acted as Khoa's trusted right-hand man, directly overseeing on-the-ground coordination. His responsibilities ranged from staging the fake robbery at the farm to arranging the successful transport of rhino horns out of South Africa via air routes. Once sufficient evidence had been gathered, South African police decided to move in. Tran Huy Bao was placed under close surveillance. Intelligence sources indicated that he was preparing to leave South Africa with his family, suggesting he may have sensed danger and was attempting to flee. As anticipated, on February 24, 2026, Tran Huy Bao appeared at Cape Town International Airport, intending to board a flight to Singapore. Special Forces officers, already positioned in advance, quickly moved in and subdued him. At the scene, authorities seized all of his luggage and electronic devices for further investigation. Following Bao's arrest, attention shifted to Chu Dong Khoa, the alleged mastermind behind the entire network. According to the Education for Nature Vietnam organization, Khoa had been quietly residing in South Africa since late 2023, maintaining a legitimate front through Voi Game Lodge. Once an international warrant was issued, his every move came under close surveillance by local authorities. Just days after Bao's capture, a special task force coordinated with local police to carry out a raid in the Heidelberg area. There, Chu Dong Khoa was successfully apprehended without any opportunity to resist. With that, the most critical figures in the smuggling network had been brought to justice. According to investigative records, Chu Dong Khoa was born in 1,982 inches Nguyen province. His mother, Chu Thi Tien, is a well-known businesswoman in Nguyen and serves as chairwoman of Thien Minh Duc Group. The Chu family is recognized for owning numerous businesses across various sectors, including petroleum, energy, logistics, real estate, hospitality, tourism, and aquaculture. From a young age, Khoa was groomed to follow the family's business path. He studied abroad in Australia before moving to South Africa to pursue a career in the diamond industry. His involvement in trading diamonds and other luxury goods earned him the notorious nickname Diamond Tycoon within Vietnamese business circles. On the surface, Chu Dong Khoa was known as a successful young entrepreneur. He maintained an extensive international network, possessed deep knowledge of the African market, and remained closely connected to the business community in Vietnam. Beyond his legitimate business ventures, Khoa also drew attention for his extravagant lifestyle. He was reportedly the owner of a high-end Porsche supercar with a rare quad-digit license plate, as well as a large luxury villa in Hanoi, furnished with opulent interiors. In addition, Chu Dong Quo's wife was also a well-known figure among the elite, owning a collection of diamonds, luxury watches, and designer handbags worth tens of billions of VND. Although not active in the entertainment industry, Chu Dong Quo's name once made headlines due to personal scandals. In 2015, he was rumored to have had a romantic relationship with a top-tier Vietnamese singer after intimate photos of the two were leaked on social media. At that time, Khoa had not yet finalized his divorce from his wife, which quickly turned the incident into a widely discussed controversy for an extended period. However, behind that glamorous facade, Quo's life concealed dark criminal activities that had been carefully hidden for many years. His true obsession was not diamonds, but rhino horns and various other wildlife products. According to investigative reports from Financial Mail, Chu Dong Quoc first arrived in South Africa in the mid-2000s. At the time, he operated under the cover of a hunter in the Limpopo region, where rhino hunting under permit quotas was still considered legal. Khoa then gradually built his empire in South Africa. In 2005, he registered DKC Trading in Johannesburg. Initially, the company operated under the guise of a timber and furniture business. In reality, however, it gradually became a perfect front for wildlife trafficking operations. Quoc quickly established close connections with wildlife farms and professional local hunters. He skillfully exploited loopholes in South African law at the time, specifically the legal allowance for rhino hunting and the lack of strict controls over the export of animal parts. As a result, he accumulated large quantities of rhino horns, ivory, and tiger and lion bones, which were secretly trafficked to Asia. In November 2011, Chu Dong Quoc was first caught by South African authorities when police discovered him in possession of 5 rhino horns without legal permits. This incident brought him before the court on criminal charges. However, due to legal loopholes at the time and possibly financial influence, the sentence was relatively lenient. Khoa was fined $3,000, equivalent to 40,000 rand at the time, and ordered to be deported from South Africa. In December 2011, Chu Dong Quoc returned to Vietnam after narrowly escaping serious consequences. The light penalty not only emboldened him, but also reinforced his confidence to continue carrying out even more sophisticated smuggling operations. Since after 2011, although no longer appearing publicly in South Africa, Chu Dong Quoc continued to secretly operate his entire network from afar. According to a 2016 report by the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime, Khoa had officially resurfaced as an intermediary specializing in the supply of wildlife. Notably, his company DKC Trading was believed to be a key supplier of numerous rare animal species from South Africa for the Vin Pearl Safari project located on Quoc Island. Chu Dong Quoc organized the procurement of dozens of white rhinos along with various species of tigers, lions, deer, and primates from private farms in South Africa. These animals were transported to Vin Pearl Safari, a zoo with a total investment of 147 million USD, which officially opened in late 2015 in Vietnam. This situation raised significant concerns among observers. Many warned that importing such a large number of wild animals carried a high risk of being exploited as a cover to illegally traffic horns and bones into the black market. Financial Mail also pointed out multiple indications suggesting that Quoc's Voi Game Lodge served as a primary supplier for this project. Export records revealed shipments that included 50 tigers along with numerous rhinos. It appeared that Khoa was using legal import-export channels as a legitimate outlet while simultaneously maintaining illegal trade in wildlife products. According to investigative findings, Voi Lodge spans approximately 924 hectares and houses around 50 tigers along with many rhinos. On the surface, the farm organizes licensed hunting trips for tourists. However, its true purpose is believed to be the legalization of rhino harvesting for horns, a sophisticated scheme known as pseudo-hunting. Between 2009 and 2011, at least 48 rhino hunts involving Vietnamese hunters were organized. These hunts were conducted under the guidance of professional hunter Frickie Jacobs at Voi Lodge and an affiliated farm. In reality, these hunters were merely present to provide legal cover, while all the rhino horns obtained ultimately ended up in Quoc's possession. In addition to rhinos, Voyage also raised tigers. Since tigers are not native to South Africa, regulations governing them were significantly less strict. Khoa exploited this legal loophole to freely harvest tiger bones without requiring any permits. Conservation groups have expressed serious concerns that tiger bones from Voyage may have been cleverly disguised as lion bones and smuggled into Asia, as lion bones were legally exportable under quota systems at the time. Khoa's operation was so sophisticated that there were suspicions his network had connections with the Zaisavang Group, a notorious criminal syndicate led by Kingpin K. Zaisavang in Laos, known for orchestrating cross-border trafficking of rhino horns, antelope horns, and tiger bones. Notably, the case of Chudong Khoa is far from an isolated incident. In reality, it is intertwined with a series of economic scandals and other illegal networks. For instance, on January 18, 2025, authorities in Vietnam officially charged and detained Chu Thi Thien, Khoa's mother. This action was taken as part of an investigation into embezzlement, as well as the illegal printing, issuance, and trading of invoices and documents. The expanded investigation revealed that the family's businesses were involved in numerous serious violations related to finance and taxation. Most notably, the company had unlawfully advanced a massive sum of approximately 300 million USD to Chudong Khoa and Chu Thi Thien for personal use, despite still carrying significant debts to the state budget. This chain of events quickly shocked public opinion and is believed to be one of the key reasons why Chudong Khoa left Vietnam for South Africa in late 2023. Chudong Khoa himself had previously been involved in several controversies within Vietnam. Notably, in late 2011, when stopped by authorities for a routine check in Hanoi, Khoa lost his temper and threw a Zippo lighter at a female journalist who was recording the incident. This reckless act immediately sparked public outrage, further adding to the controversial profile of the so-called Diamond Tycoon. To this day, it remains unclear whether he faced any appropriate consequences for that incident. From a broader societal perspective, this entire series of scandals exposes a deeply concerning connection between the ultra-wealthy and environmental crime networks. Chudong Khoa stands as a prime example of a businessman who possessed vast resources and extensive connections, yet chose to exploit those privileges to engage in wildlife trafficking. Licensed establishments such as Voi Game Lodge were transformed into perfect covers for illicit operations. At the same time, loopholes in wildlife management and hunting regulations were fully exploited by this network for personal gain. As of now, the case of Chudong Khoa and his accomplices remains in the early stages of legal proceedings in South Africa. On March 12, 2026, Khoa officially appeared before the Kempton Park Magistrates Court. There, he was formally presented with charges related to the illegal possession and transportation of parts from endangered species, including rhino horns, tiger bones, and lion bones, under South Africa's National Environmental Management Biodiversity Act. In addition, prosecutors are considering further charges such as staging a false crime scene, fraud, and potential weapons-related violations if evidence supports them. The two Nigerian suspects arrested earlier also appeared alongside Khoa at this preliminary hearing. As for Trun Huy Bauer, who was apprehended in Cape Town, he is expected to be transferred to Gauteng for a joint trial due to the direct connection of his case to the broader network. At present, both Chudong Khoa and Trun Huy Bauer remain in custody. Their defense attorneys have filed motions for bail. However, South African prosecutors have stated they will strongly oppose these requests, arguing that the defendants possess substantial financial resources and extensive international connections, making them high-flight risks and potential threats to the ongoing investigation. The case is likely to be escalated to a higher court between 2026 and 2027. If convicted, Chudong Khoa could face a severe prison sentence ranging from 10 to 15 years or even longer under South African law for trafficking endangered wildlife. In addition, he would almost certainly be subject to substantial financial penalties. In the end, justice is gradually being served. From a once powerful and affluent businessman, Chudong Khoa now stands before the court facing serious charges. His case serves as a stark reminder that acts of environmental destruction driven by greed will eventually be exposed and punished. As stated by Education for Nature Vietnam, no one stands above the law, not even the wealthy who once believed they could buy their way out of consequences. In August 2023, at the U.S. Consulate General in Ho Chi Minh City, an atmosphere of sudden tension spread through the building when diplomatic staff received an anonymous email containing threats. Specifically, in the email dated August 7, 2023, the anonymous sender angrily declared an intention to bomb the consulate, accompanied by aggressive and vulgar language that left everyone shocked. Notably, the sender claimed to be the wife of a man who was currently dealing with visa procedures. The message expressed anger over delays in the visa process and vowed retaliation through extreme actions. The shock quickly spread among diplomatic personnel, as it was the first time the U.S. Consulate General here had faced such a direct and aggressive threat. Faced with the situation, the incident was quickly reported to the relevant authorities. In Vietnam, the security of U.S. diplomatic missions is coordinated between local security forces and the Diplomatic Security Service of the United States Department of State. However, due to the serious nature of the message, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, also had to quickly step in. Experts believe that this might not simply be a prank, but a sign of a genuinely dangerous plot. Therefore, all emergency response procedures were immediately activated. At the same time, all staff were instructed to heighten their vigilance, and a series of additional security measures were strictly implemented to prevent any possible incident. Just a few months later, in October 2023, the U.S. Consulate General in Ho Chi Minh City was shaken once again by a new series of threatening emails. This time, the messages were sent under the identity of a man and carried equally malicious content. The anonymous sender declared that he would take the lives of everyone responsible for delaying the issuance of a visa for his wife, claiming that the delay had forced the couple to live apart. These emails were sent to at least 3 government employees working at the U.S. consulate, leaving everyone deeply shocked. When investigators compared them with the threat sent in August, they quickly noticed very clear similarities. It was still the same story about visa procedures being delayed, along with aggressive language demanding revenge. However, the only difference was that this time, the sender claimed to be the husband himself, identified by the initials TH, rather than the wife, as stated in the previous emails. Immediately after the bomb threat emails were sent to the U.S. Consulate General in Ho Chi Minh City, the FBI quickly coordinated with the Diplomatic Security Service of the United States Department of State to launch an investigation across 2 continents. At this point, investigators began focusing on the common element in the messages. Specifically, all the emails mentioned delays in issuing a visa for the wife of a man identified by the initials TH. The first step in solving the case was to verify the identity of TH. Through intergovernmental information systems, the FBI determined that he was a Vietnamese-born resident in his 30s who was currently living in Pasadena, California. More importantly, the man indeed had a wife living overseas who was waiting for an immigrant visa to enter the United States. This detail explained why the story about the visa delay appeared in the threatening emails. It turned out that the situation was not entirely fabricated by the perpetrator, but was based on a real circumstance. Therefore, the FBI did not rule out the possibility that TH or his wife could be directly connected to the threats, whether as victims or perpetrators. To clarify the situation, FBI agents directly contacted TH toward the end of 2023. The results were surprising, as the man and his wife themselves had been subjected to psychological harassment for several months. Specifically, beginning in April 2023, TH repeatedly received disturbing emails threatening to kill both him and his wife. At first, he assumed he was simply the victim of harassment. However, the severity quickly escalated when one of the emails sent to him included a screenshot of a secret arrangement. The image showed that someone was attempting to hire another person to harm his wife for a payment of $15,000. Clearly, such horrifying statements could not be dismissed as a simple malicious prank. The anonymous perpetrator did not stop there. The individual also displayed extremely bizarre behavior. The person repeatedly sent TH several photos of themselves along with flirtatious messages suggesting an inappropriate relationship, seemingly attempting to mock and psychologically torment the victim. This disturbing behavior pushed TH into a state of genuine panic. His family's life was no longer peaceful, as there were moments when the electricity in their home was suddenly cut off for no clear reason, followed by various other strange issues that seemed as if someone had deliberately interfered. All documents related to these incidents were submitted by TH to investigators as evidence. TH firmly insisted that he had absolutely no connection to the emails sent to the consulate. Instead, he suspected that the person responsible for everything was the same individual who had been harassing him and his wife for a long time. Soon after, an important clue emerged from electronic traces that the perpetrator had inadvertently left behind. Specifically, when the FBI traced the threatening email sent to the consulate, they uncovered a surprising fact. The attacker had secretly gained access to TH's email account and used it to distribute the threatening messages. This detail explained why the emails sent in October 2023 appeared to originate directly from TH's mailbox, which initially led authorities to mistakenly believe that he was the person threatening the consulate. Fortunately for TH, FBI agents quickly noticed these suspicious signs. In addition, FBI technology specialists worked with cybercrime units to trace the IP addresses associated with other fraudulent emails. The results immediately pointed to the Pasadena area in California, more specifically around the San Gabriel Valley. This region has a large Vietnamese community and is also the city where TH lives. This discovery made the investigation even more intense than before, because if the suspect was also in Pasadena, it was very likely that the person could be someone familiar to TH. At the same time, the FBI requested court warrants to obtain records from internet and email service providers. Their goal was to determine who was actually behind the IP address that had illegally accessed TH's email account. Not long afterward, the results identified a specific individual, Nathalie Nguyen. From that point on, the profile of the suspect gradually became clearer. Nathalie Nguyen was identified as a 39-year-old Vietnamese woman currently living in Pasadena. According to TH, she was not a stranger, but someone who had previously known his family. Although the exact nature of their relationship has not been publicly disclosed by authorities, it was clear that Nathalie knew TH and his wife very well in order to carry out such sophisticated impersonation. Based on the collected evidence, the FBI conducted discreet surveillance of Nathalie Nguyen for a short period in order to strengthen their case file. During this time, the woman appeared completely unaware that her dark actions had already been discovered. By January 2024, as the Lunar New Year was approaching, the anonymous individual suddenly issued another threat. On January 26th, a message was sent through the online portal of the U.S. diplomatic mission, declaring that an explosion would occur at the facility in Saigon, warning that everything would be destroyed around the New Year period or shortly afterward. In the letter, the perpetrator continued impersonating TH's wife and once again blamed the authorities for causing her and her husband to be separated for nearly a year. By February 2024, the severity of the threats escalated even further. Through the online portal of the diplomatic mission, the impersonator sent another message referring to the use of explosives during the Lunar New Year at the U.S. Consulate General. In the message, the sender even emphasized that the wife was ready for the plan. Just a few minutes later, the mission received another email repeating the same threatening content. At this point, thanks to the electronic traces and the careful surveillance conducted earlier, the FBI had enough evidence to confidently determine that Nathalie Nguyen was behind all of these threats. Once they had sufficient proof in hand, the task force decided to arrest Nathalie Nguyen. She was immediately transferred to a federal detention facility to await trial. According to information reported by CBS News, the grand jury initially charged Nathalie with 4 counts, including stalking, transmitting threats to kill through federal communication channels, threatening to destroy property using fire or explosives, and offenses related to identity impersonation. These were clearly very serious charges that accurately reflected the nature of the defendant's actions. As the case gradually became clear, the name Nathalie Nguyen quickly became the center of attention. Who was she, and how could she carry out such a bold revenge plan? According to official records, Nathalie Nguyen was born around 1984 and currently lives in the San Gabriel Valley in California. The fact that a middle-aged woman with no prior criminal record became involved in a federal criminal case for threatening high-level security shocked many people. Court records show that Nathalie Nguyen had a personal acquaintance with TH. Her disturbing, flirtatious behavior and ambiguous messages suggested that she may have developed a one-sided affection or an unhealthy psychological obsession with the man. Nathalie may have deeply resented TH's wife and viewed her as an obstacle standing in the way of the man she desired. To satisfy that hatred, Nathalie Nguyen devised a sophisticated plan that lasted for many months. First, she began monitoring TH, possibly through social media, email, and even by closely observing his residence, gathering information such as his address, phone number, daily habits, and especially details about his wife who was still in her home country. Once she had gathered enough information, Nathalie moved to the psychological attack phase by repeatedly sending threatening emails to TH, declaring that she would take the lives of both husband and wife. Not stopping there, she also devised various bizarre schemes aimed at disrupting the couple's daily life. For example, the woman attempted to cut off electricity to TH's home by contacting the power company and impersonating the homeowner to request service cancellation. After that, Nathalie also secretly interfered with their health insurance, most likely by falsifying information to cancel or alter the terms of their policy. All of these actions revealed a cruel and systematic revenge plan designed to destroy the target both psychologically and materially. Ultimately, the most insidious step in Nathalie's entire plan was impersonating the victims in order to target a third party. She pretended to be TH and his wife to send threatening letters to US diplomatic missions. She even took the time to carefully research information about employees working at the consulate and inserted those details into the emails in order to create psychological fear for each individual. This tactic was truly a case of killing two birds with one stone, as it not only placed TH in serious legal trouble, but also further delayed the visa approval process for his wife. Clearly, no authority would dare issue a visa to a family placed under such serious suspicion. Looking deeper into the psychological aspect, authorities discovered signs suggesting that Nathalie Nguyen was experiencing mental instability. During the legal proceedings, the defendant personally wrote a letter to the court admitting that she had mental health issues and requesting outpatient treatment. Later on, Nathalie's defense attorney also emphasized that his client had been going through psychological crises at the time of the incident, which led to a series of uncontrollable actions. However, experts also pointed out that mental health issues cannot be used as a justification for a calculated series of actions carried out over nearly a year. As in Nathalie's case, actions such as illegally accessing email accounts, impersonating others, collecting personal information, and constructing elaborate threat scenarios clearly showed that she remained capable of planning and executing a highly sophisticated scheme. The case was later brought before the federal court in Los Angeles, with Judge Sherilyn Peace Garnett presiding, a judge well known for her experience in handling complex criminal cases. Faced with overwhelming evidence, Nathalie Nguyen ultimately chose to cooperate with the prosecution. Instead of allowing the case to proceed to trial on all charges, she agreed to plead guilty under a plea agreement with prosecutors. Specifically, she accepted responsibility for 2 of the 4 main charges, including stalking and transmitting threats to take another person's life, as well as threatening to destroy property by fire or explosive through federal communication channels. These 2 charges were considered the most serious, representing both the personal harassment and the broader security threats carried out by the defendant. As for the remaining charges, prosecutors likely agreed to drop them under the plea agreement, which helped accelerate the legal process and avoid a prolonged and contentious trial. During the plea hearing, Nathalie's defense attorney, Benjamin P. Lechman, delivered a statement requesting leniency for his client. The lawyer emphasized that no one had suffered physical harm throughout the case, meaning that the direct consequences were primarily psychological rather than physical. In addition, he also described Nathalie's circumstances, arguing that she had been suffering from serious psychological problems during the time of the offenses, but had since come to her senses and now wished for an opportunity to rebuild her life. Nevertheless, the prosecution did not soften its position. Representing the United States Attorney's Office, prosecutor Diane B. Roldan from the Major Crimes Section submitted a sentencing memorandum with very firm arguments. In the document, the prosecutor described in detail Nathalie's sophisticated methods and characterized the case as a cruel campaign of psychological intimidation that severely disrupted the lives of many people. The prosecution also noted the maximum penalties Nathalie could face under the law: 5 years in prison for the stalking charge and 10 years for transmitting threats. This meant that the total sentence could reach up to 15 years in federal prison if the sentences were imposed consecutively. The sentencing hearing took place on February 4, 2026, at the federal court in Los Angeles. After listening to arguments from both sides, Judge Sherilyn Peace Garnett deliberated before delivering the final decision. In the end, the sentence closely matched the prosecution's recommendation: 64 months in prison, equivalent to 5 years and 4 months for Nathalie Nguyen. In addition, the defendant was ordered to pay $5,372 in restitution for damages and expenses resulting from her actions. Many observers considered the sentence appropriate for the dangerous nature of Natalie's conduct, while also reflecting mitigating factors such as her admission of guilt, cooperation with investigators, and the fact that no physical harm had occurred. At the hearing, Natalie Nguyen openly expressed remorse for all of her actions. Through her defense attorney, she conveyed that she simply hoped to leave everything behind and move forward with her life in a more positive direction. She also wanted to encourage anyone experiencing psychological difficulties to seek help early rather than allowing themselves to continue down a path of mistakes. Looking back at the entire case, it can be seen as a particularly serious scandal where cybercrime, security, intimidation, and personal hatred intersected. From a personal emotional conflict, Natalie Nguyen exploited the online space to launch a series of cross-border threats, targeting both individuals and United States diplomatic institutions. The case also highlights a worrying reality. In the digital age, personal conflicts can easily escalate into an international security crisis if they fall into the hands of extremists. For the victims, the arrest and conviction of the perpetrator finally brought an end to a nightmare that had lasted for many months. TH and his wife now have the opportunity to return to a normal life, while employees at the consulate can gradually release the constant fear for their safety and that of their families. However, the deep psychological scars they endured will likely take a long time to heal. In your opinion, is the sentence given to someone who impersonated others to threaten security strong enough to serve as a deterrent? And what should we do to protect ourselves in an era where almost every personal trace can be found on the internet? Please share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. And if today's case has given you new perspectives on criminal psychology and cybersecurity, please support Vietnamese case files with a like and share of the video. To be the first to explore the next mysterious case files with us, remember to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. For now, goodbye, and see you again in the next episode of Vietnamese Case Files.